Blue-White Breakdown podcast, almost in mid-April. I'm Bob Flounders, joined by Dave Jones. We're just days away, Dave, from the Blue-White game. I know you are.
My favorite day. Always is.
Pretty pumped. We got a couple different things we want to touch on in this edition of the Blue-White Breakdown podcast. But we're going to start with a piece that ran on ESPN. Today is Tuesday lunchtime. It ran yesterday on ESPN.com, an at-length story on a former Penn State player who was a member of the team in the mid to late 70s, Todd Hodney. I believe I have that pronunciation right. And he was just a horrible human being. And ESPN did a very lengthy story about some of the things he did in the 70s and 80s. He's no longer alive, but it's quite a story, and it really goes into detail about somebody who was a predator at Penn State, preyed on women, and he actually once he left Penn State, reading the story, Dave, it sounds like that pursuit continued before he was put into jail. He died in jail, but just an incredible piece of reporting by Penn State.
I believe the authors are Tom Junod. Is that how you say that? And Paul.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Who did the Baylor? I think she did a lot of the Baylor story with that mess. And I'm looking at reactions. The reactions seem to fall in two camps. And if you haven't heard, you must have probably heard about this. Most of you by now. If you haven't, it is a tough read. And it what do you think? It's got to be 20,000 words, right?
It's the longest story I can ever remember reading
on a site. Yeah.
On a site. Honestly, I think it's almost a book, Dave. It's almost like one of those mini books.
Yeah. And I mean, if you don't want to read it, fine. But it is an unending siege of rapes that this guy committed. And the reactions seem to fall in two camps. And one is, why are we reading about this 43 years later? And the authors, read what they said about it is mainly because once you got into the stories of these women who were mainly ignored back then in 1979, you couldn't not listen to them. And having covered cops and courts and heard stories like that in a former life back in the late 80s, I know what they meant. It's tough reading. It is. It really doesn't. Even though they put a reference to Sandusky and Paterno out front, I think that was probably done by producers at ESPN. It doesn't have that much to do with Joe Paterno. It's mainly just a slice of a period. A monstrous guy who was recruited out of Long Island. And what he was allowed to do largely by a judge up there named Sharp, who allowed him to walk on bail even after he was convicted, which is the really outrageous part of it. But, people ask, why are they writing this now? And they're trying to smear Penn State. I don't think that really has anything to do with it. It's just a slice of a different time from 1979. And a story that really hasn't been told. I never even heard of this guy. Yeah. I don't think you did, right? You ever heard of him?
No, I don't know. Those are. I mean, Dave. When he played. He was a member of some very talented teams, and he was never a name I think that I ever came across.
No, and then he was thrown off the team by Paterno after his conviction and bounced around because of this judge. Anyway. Read it if you want. Don't read it if you want. I read the whole thing, and it's astounding and disturbing. And be ready. So, it's not like this is the feel-good podcast of the year because the more bad news is Gary Brown, right? One of the best guys you could ever meet on a complete contrast, who started when he was playing when I began, was kind of turned into a defensive back. Instead of a running back because they knew they had Leroy Thompson. I can't remember who else, but Joe thought his running back room was filled up and made Gary into a DB. And then when he got back to the pros, he had 2 and almost 3,000-yard seasons as a running back. But his best contribution might have been as a coach. Who he was known as a really good both NFL coach and later not that long a college coach at Wisconsin. And he just died last week. You must have run into him at one time or another as an NFL coach, or did you? No?
As an NFL player, I can remember him. I can remember him on that Oilers. He was on a really good Oilers team. He was a feature back. I think he kind of fell into that role. The starting runner got hurt. It might have been Lorenzo White. And he took over. They didn't miss a beat. I think that was 93 or 94. He had another 1,000-yard season with the Giants. Williamsport High School, standout legend at Williamsport High School, not too far away from Penn State. But he coached with the Cowboys. I know a lot. I mean, the Cowboys put out a statement. I know he was close to some people in the Cowboys organization. And then, Dave, just recently, I think you had a chance to talk to him. Was it prior to Penn State's season opening win at Wisconsin in 2021? I believe he had battled cancer numerous times and had fought it off. But I think I don't know if they had an official cause of death, but where that cancer was in his body, it made you wonder how much longer he could fight it off.
And I asked him specifically. I mean, I let off the story. It was 7 months ago before the Wisconsin game, because he was the running backs coach and really uniformly loved by all the players who were coached by him, simply because he was buoyant and upbeat and had a smile on his face. And if you've been coached by guys like that, you know they can coach you hard and you don't mind. They challenge you, but they have a love of the game and a love of football that infuses everything they do. They can get away with stuff that pricks cannot, and he was one of those guys. I mean, a joy to be around. And when I talked to him, I asked him specifically, I said, "Are you in remission?" And he goes, "Well, he kind of answered around the question, which made me wonder. He said, "I never say that I'm completely in remission, because I always have to have my guard up, take my meds, make sure I eat right, make sure I live right. And I don't want to ever take my guard down for that." And that it ended up getting him in the end. And he's been in hospice care the last couple of weeks or so. Anyway, a tough loss for everyone around Penn State football, because he was a really seriously good dude. But you, what else? Well, Sean Clifford's NIL.
I wanted to add to the Gary Brown story. As much as Penn State, just hearing you talk about him, as much as Penn State has got the moniker linebacker U, and that might be outdated a little bit now, but in the 80s and the 90s and 10, 15 years ago, even 2012, just tremendous linebackers that went on to play in the NFL. But I really kind of feel, Dave, that mostly with Joe, but also a little bit beyond Joe, Penn State's ability to recruit running backs, just stacks and stacks of running backs, and almost have so many running backs, they could move them to other positions or move them from another position. I mean, they just had so many running backs have big games. They've had one-hit wonders. They've had guys, though, that are they've had some really talented athletes that played running back at one point and then either moved to another position and made it to the NFL, or it's just amazing how well they've recruited running backs, especially during, I think, Paterno's time.
And Gary accepted Joe's judgment that he had too many running backs, and if he wanted to get on the field, and Gary wanted to get on the field, that he was going to have to play another position. He went to the defensive coaches and said, "Turn me into a safety." And he was a really good safety. I mean, he it's not that often. I know it's 30 years ago, but it's still not that often you see a guy turn from one position and is a very good player. And remember, he had the steal and score against Brigham Young in the Holiday Bowl.
Were you at that game?
No, even Ronnie wasn't at that game. Which
started at like 1 a.m, didn't it?
Well, it was a huge deal because Ron Menard, the then executive editor at the Patriot News, decided not to send Ronnie, which pissed him off. And that was my very, very first year. I was covering Pitt at that time, and I wasn't really involved in Penn State. I just remember how mad Ronnie was about that, and he was fuming because, for one thing, you don't get to go to San Diego. A bowl trip is kind of a reward, especially back then. Even if the team is 8-4 or whatever they were, the '89 team was not very good. It was a late start where it would have been almost impossible to get the game story in without extending the deadline. And the editor made an executive decision. I don't think Nick would have done that, but Ronnie didn't get to go, so we did not cover that bowl game.
Yeah,
which is probably the last time. That was the last time we did not have anybody at a Penn State bowl game, 1989.
So Nick Horvath, our former boss, I had 1 year on the famous Pitt Panthers beat as the backup high school writer. How many years were you covering?
I didn't remember you did that. You did that?
Yeah, my first year here.
94.
93. Nick called me in the office. It's like I was backing up Rod Frisco on the high school beat. He's like, Bob, you're the backup high school writer. This is how we cover Pitt. Friday night, I'm going to send you as far west as I possibly can in our coverage area, which is like 45 minutes.
Okay.
Like 45 minutes. Yeah. Like he's doing me a favor.
He went to Waynesboro or what?
Cover a game. I need you to cover a game, write a story as fast as you can, then get on the turnpike at like 11:30, midnight, whatever it is. We're going to put you up in a hotel room. Yeah, at 3:30 in the morning.
Did you go to the Howard Johnsons?
No, it was a Holiday Inn in Oakland, and I would get in at 3:30 in the morning. And Pitt that year every game they played was at like noon.
Yeah,
on the Hill.
Yeah,
and it was the thing I remember about it. I think that was Johnny Major's first year back at Pittsburgh, and they were just like a 500 team. But the running back that year was Curtis Martin, who turned into he turned into a Hall of Famer. Great career with the Patriots and the Jets, and he was just great to cover. But I remember he even sent me to their training camp at Pitt Johnstown for a couple days, and I can remember having a couple drinks at the bar with Gene Collier. That it was like the only bar. It was one of the only bars in Johnstown, and I had really no idea how great Gene Collier was. But it was an incredible memory, and I actually, in a weird way, I kind of enjoyed covering it because it was kind of hard to do, and I was young then, and I was exhausted by the time I got home Saturday.
I did it in '89 and '90. Maybe I didn't have Curtis Martin. I can't remember, but Paul Hackett was the coach.
Yeah.
And Alex Van Pelt was the quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't even remember who the quarterback was. Curtis Martin ran the ball 35 times a game.
Yeah. That's what you would do with Curtis Martin, even back then. But yeah, what I remember is I had to do the same thing, cover a high school game, come in the office, blast through your story as fast as possible, and then get on the turnpike if you were lucky by 11:15. Yeah. And you arrive. I had to go to a Howard Johnson's.
Hojo. Because
they were cheap in Oakland. At least you didn't have – I think I could walk to the game, but you had to walk up Heartbreak Hill. You've had like 4 hours sleep. You're exhausted. and this Howard Johnson's had a heater or air conditioner or whatever the hell it was. Every 6 minutes would go wah, and wake you up. You know, no matter how you had to sleep with like a pillow over your head and try to.
Loved it. What do you did? 4 years in a row? 3 years in a row?
Just do 89 and 90, as I remember. Someone must have done it in between. I don't know.
What I remember about the drive out after filing is the fog on the turnpike, because you were going up, like a lot of fog. That's just what you need when you're trying to stay awake.
You had it better than I did, buddy, because they had an actual concrete median by the time you did it. You don't remember. You don't remember. There was no median. All there was a guardrail in between. In the early 90s, late 80s, all there was guardrails. And you remember the lanes are so close together, the oncoming lanes and the lanes you're on.
Oh, I know.
There would be headlights in your face the entire time. I mean, I know it's not a lot of traffic at that time of night, but still it would blind you every time some truck, and it's going right by. It's not like other interstates. It was weird. And enough of that crap anyway. How did we get on
All
that?
right, so what's that?
How did we get on that?
Because we were talking about you said something about covering Pittsburgh. I don't know how we led to that, but anyway.
Because
the point is we successfully filled another 5 minutes of this podcast, and that was one of my goals, to get you and me on a tangent, and it worked. Let's circle back to Penn State spring practice. Here's a thought for you, Dave. With all the guys that are going to be in the Penn State draft that could go in the first 3, 4, first 4 or 5 rounds, who do you? I know that you don't really have a lot of knowledge just yet about the 2022 team, but can you try and imagine, like, looking ahead, who's like the one player you think on this team? And I have a couple names in mind that I think has a chance to be, a top 50 player, maybe a first-team All-Big Ten player by the time the fall and the winter of 2023 roll around. There's a couple of choices out there. There's no Jahan Dotson. They lost all the good players, just about all the good players on their defense. But I have a name or two that I could throw out. I just think it's a really kind of an interesting year, because whenever this happens at Penn State, Dave, that means if we can't identify the player, there's going to be 2 or 3 players that really surprise us in the fall, because I think that almost always happens on the Penn State beat.
Well, the guy that comes immediately to mind to me is Adisa Isaac, because he didn't get an opportunity last year, and everyone was saying he was going to be a killer, right? Everyone loved him.
He was in that 2019 class. He was at the very tip top, if not the first player. He was like 1 or 2. There were not many other players that were ranked as highly as him. So,
and God knows they need him. I mean, they have. I think they have about 50% of their defensive of the tackles back on that. Is that about right? 56% or something.
Yeah, and their best player, PJ Mustafer, who is like an obvious choice to a lot of fans, but when you're that big and you have that kind of knee surgery, you just don't know how long it's going to take him to round into form.
And I suppose, I guess I need somebody on offense. I don't know.
You can take. I know you're a big Parker Washington fan. I just don't know if he's going to make that big of a.
I don't know if he has that kind of ceiling. Caden Wallace. I mean,
Caden Wallace is a guy they're definitely counting on. They only returned 2 starters on the offensive line, and the offensive line is not. It's one of the thinnest offensive lines that James has had. So there's really some questions about that group.
At least he has a lot of experience. He has a lot of starts under his belt. You figure he should make a jump in performance. So those would be my 2 picks. Who are yours?
I'll give you 3 names, and I'm talking about. I just think that the way this guy has gotten better every year at Penn State, and I know you know him, but I'm talking about this guy should be in the conversation to be a first-team All-Big Ten player, and I think close to a top 50, top 60 player minimum in the draft. Jair Brown, the safety, who 6 interceptions, 2 fumble recovers. The guy is always around the ball. The best safety in coverage I've seen at Penn State since I've been covering the team. They've had some guys that were really good in run support. Marcus Allen was like that, but this is a guy I think that, in the NFL, if you can't cover as a safety, you really can't play. So I think that his game actually suits probably the NFL mold even a little bit more. He's one. Curtis Jacobs, if he leaves school early, would be another. And there was a player on the offensive side that really would have to have a breakout, but I think he fits all of my markers. It's Theo Johnson, the tight end, in his 3rd year. If you remember, Mike Gesicki was kind of quiet his first 2 years at Penn State, and then he got working with Moorhead in that 16 offense, and he had some great skilled people around him. But Theo Johnson is that kind of an athlete. So those are my 3 guys.
Have you looked at the draft as far as where you think some of these guys are going? And I mean, when is the threshold where they have to declare they're coming back if they're coming back? Because I don't even know. Is it?
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's actually, you don't declare you're coming back. You have until the middle of January to declare for the draft.
That's what.
So yeah. So they have roughly. I mean, there were 2 weeks after the bowl game. If you figure January 1st is like that date, or about 6 weeks after the season kind of ends. So, I mean, Jair Brown could have easily left. I think after 2021, I think he made the right decision. Curtis Jacobs, I just think, is a guy that they're probably going to move him inside. I don't know. I hope he gets a little bit bigger because I really enjoyed the way he played with his speed And then Theo Johnson, we just haven't seen enough of. They have 3 tight ends. I think he drops some passes, but that's going to happen when you're young. But, man, he's 6'6", 255. He's testing off the charts. I really like those 3 guys. Their offensive center, Juice Scruggs, is another guy to watch. He was their best offensive lineman last year. But I'm just really wondering about if they're going to be an 8 or 9 win team. Somebody's going to have to step up in a huge way because they just lost some really, really, really fantastic players, and it's going to bear itself out in the draft.
I'm curious what you think about Joey Porter.
I was tempted to mention him too. I think he is another guy that I think NFL talent for sure. He can run. He's got that long. He's 6'1", 6'2". I'm curious
what you're. So as far as what he can do to improve, I'm curious if you're going to say what's in my head here.
The only thing that really gave him problems last year is he was too aggressive in coverage and he got called for flags.
That's right. Yeah.
And James mentioned it, but there are worse things than being too handsy because, and I'm just talking about football. I'm not talking about any other aspect of life because there are problems if you get too handsy. But that means you're going to play press coverage, and you know what? You're close enough to the guy to make the play. You just got to keep your hands off the guy.
And a lot of times, I don't think he needed to do what he did. He just didn't know the limits of what the official was going to throw the flag on, and then they threw it. He didn't have to do it to be in. Like you say, if you're in position, if you're that close, that's a good thing. That means good coverage. And so
I thought his year was a little bit better than a lot of people dinged him on. Everyone always it's easy to focus on the bad plays talented players make, but he also made a lot of nice. He made a play on the goal line in the Wisconsin game that saved the touchdown.
Yeah,
when they were driving.
To me, he's a big corner, which you don't see corners his size that much.
Right.
He's in cover. That's a good combination.
Yeah, I mean Amani Arawarie was kind of big too. He's actually a really good player with the Lions now. He lasted till the 3rd or 4th round, but he was a first-team All-Big Ten player. I think Joey Porter could certainly be in the conversation. He's not lacking in talent. He's got the pedigree, and I just think that I think he's definitely worthy of a guy that we could be talking a lot about him in November. But unfortunately, Dave, we haven't mentioned a lot of offensive players. So the game is about scoring points. So hopefully there'll be some offensive players. Maybe it'll be one of the 2 freshman running backs.
But we didn't mention Sean Clifford's NIL company either. But go ahead.
It looks like Sean's, in case the NFL doesn't work out, he's got him. I think he's got himself set up for life after football. I'm sure this is something he wants to pursue, down the line, not just this year.
Anyway, we got to get to your trip to the Masters because we only have a couple minutes left. So I never got a chance. I didn't know you only went on Thursday. That was the day that you went.
Yeah, there were a lot of people vying for passes, and I like golf. There were some people down there that love golf. Guys that golf, from spring and summer they'll golf 2 or 3 times a week. I'm not that guy. But I definitely enjoy watching the Masters. I just didn't want to get anyone. Dave, I could have fun in Georgia doing a lot of different things. And I certainly watched the Masters all 4 days, but I spent all day at the Masters on Thursday. It was a nice weather day. Tiger's best day on the golf course. Just to watch those guys play golf, to watch the crowd try and not interact, but just it is borderline worship the way that they followed Tiger around. They had 80,000 people on the course, and everyone was just talking about a guy that hadn't played in 500 days with a bionic knee. He wasn't the same old Tiger, but he was able to change his game, and he was able to finesse a lot of shots, and make some pars that you usually wouldn't make from where he made them. He made some putts, but it was so much fun. Those guys, Dave, you don't realize how good they are until you watch them effortlessly swing the club, and the ball goes, 3 times further than anyone else. Anyone, it's unbelievable. You shouldn't swing hard. Just swing easy, make great contact.
Or they can hit a 2-iron.
Yeah, they could hit a 1-iron, like stuff like that. It's crazy, but
the only guy, a regular guy I ever saw consistently hit a 2-iron was a former Penn State coach. Can you name him? He used to come to Valley Green once a year when we lived there, when we lived on number 4, which was the par 5 dogleg right, where people used to try to cut the corner and it hit my house all the time.
Well, that's what you get for buying a house on a golf course.
You shouldn't have bought a house on the golf course.
So I'm going to guess this was a guy that coached in the 90s?
Correct. And he was all done by the time he started coming over there. And Tommy Flynn and I and one guest would ride around on Valley Green, which is a weird little track, kind of short.
It is. I love that track, but it is weird. Yeah. It's very weird. Is it Fran Ganner?
Bruce Parkhill.
Oh, okay.
He was amazing, and he's a big guy. He's about 6'4". Mm-hmm. He had such a pretty swing and just could nut that thing. And did it over and over. It was one of his clubs. No one usually uses even a 3-iron. Do you even try to use a 3-iron? He did it with a 2. He did it. Yeah. I think he had a 1 back when they had those. And it was remarkable. Anyway,
Valley Green is. I'll always remember Valley Green and continue to remember Valley Green. It's a course. It's a course for the people, is how I'll put it. Because Dave, it's the only course I consistently see people out there in jeans playing.
Yeah, drunk people.
It's like 75 degrees out, and they have jeans on.
There were people in my backyard hitting balls out of my backyard, drunk at 9 a.m. I'm still. You remember the? We will finish with this. It's
on the par 5, the dogleg right. I remember where your house was.
Yeah, and I'm up near the green, not on the green, but right in front of the green on the slope. Yeah. And it's a place where guys would try. They try to.
I know I probably hit it into your yard. I just never tried to get my ball.
Well, not only did guys come in and get their balls, but they would. It was like an Easter egg hunt with some of these guys. They would just walk around and collect.
They never give up on their ball. Yeah, I don't understand that either.
Collect balls and stick them in their pockets, and finally, I'd had enough. And you remember we're working second shift hours in newspapers, and we would sleep until 11 midnight after being in the office. And there's a guy outside my bedroom window, Ann and I, my bedroom window. I think she's gone at this point. It's like a Saturday at 9 a.m., like 9:30. And he's yelling up to his buddy from, this far outside my bedroom window. And we have an enclosed fence, right, with just a little gap in the backyard. Yeah. And he's yelling up to his buddy about the pin placement. Where's the pin? Because he can't see it, And I'm like, what the? And I get out of bed. I'm pissed off. I've slept about 6 hours. I open the window, and he's right there. He's right there. He's addressing the ball, and he's going to hit out of the backyard right next to my window.
Probably take a big chunk out of it, too.
He hasn't hit yet. And I said, he's like 24, just a big dope. And I said, what are you doing? And he goes, just like this. He goes, hitting it. And I said, what if I hit you? And he was like, oh, like he was offended, and he picked up his ball and left. You never knew what you were going to get on Valley Green.
You miss living in that house. Can you imagine yourself now? Can you imagine yourself now if somebody hit the ball into your yard, how that would go? Between you and the German Shepherd, how that would go?
I got into it with some people. Ann was out gardening one time with her butt up in the air, and some guy came by and said, thank you. And she didn't know what he was talking about. And he said it again. He goes, thank you. And she said, what for? What were you talking to me? He goes, for the view. Delightful people. Delightful.
I think that's a great story to end this edition of the Pool. We certainly got to a lot of topics. Some of them difficult to talk about, others not so much. But as always, Dave, you've delivered on our edition of the Blue White Breakdown
I'm glad
podcast.
You got to go to them. I'm glad you got to go to the Masters, and we should have said that. I mean, the course is amazing, right? As far as
it is literally. To hear everyone talk about it, you're like, all right, enough about the Masters. I get it. It's a great course. I get it. It actually is a great course. Like it is. It lives up to the hype. It is just. It's unbelievable. It's its own little world. And if you ever get a chance to go, you got to do it. Even if you're not a huge golf fan, you will be entertained, and it'll be something you'll never forget. Absolutely true.
All right. I think we've wrapped it up.
All right, Dave-O, next Tuesday, and then we're 2 Saturdays away from your favorite spring Saturday of the last 25 years.
Can I just go up there now? Do I have to wait? Can I go up there now?
It's going to be you, James Franklin, Mike Yursich, a cast of thousands. I know you're looking forward to it.
I'm sure Mike Yursich will be accommodating in every way to any question we have.
That's not pertinent, Dave. Don't talk about him that way.
Yeah, I think that's irrelevant. Go ahead. Next question. All right.
Bye.
See ya.